Hi guys! Inflation in US hits 6.2% over the last 12 months, and it's 30 years high. Mass media tells us it's no longer transitional and it's 100% real. The end of the world is coming soon, and it's no longer global warming, just poor Americans cannot afford to buy anything this winter with that kind of prices. Let's examine that fear-mongering a little bit closer and try to understand where are we getting tricked. The usual yearly inflation rate in US is about 2.2%. If you look at the statistics over the last 5 years, you can see that this was true for 2017, 2018 and 2019. Then suddenly in 2020 the inflation actually got lower, it's only 1.1%, and now it's 6.3%. If you do simple math, you can see that it's only 3% more than it should have been. 3% is obviously not so cool, but this is definitely not the end of the world. The goal of this video is to understand where these 3% are coming from and whether it's still transitory or not. From the political point of view, it's very convenient to criticize an incompetent radical left Biden who printed too much money. And I fully agree that Biden sucks, but is it really what's going on there? If you take any other civilized country, for example Poland, which is 100% run by a right-wing government, they have exactly the same situation of 7% inflation this year. And the left politicians over there trying to use this situation and blame the current right-wing government in complete incompetence. If both left and right-wing governments suffers from inflation, maybe something else is going on. Clearly, the reason number one is energy prices, which affects inflation a lot. And it's not only the price at the gas pump, but pretty much it drives the prices across the board because you need to have delivery, and delivery is dependent on energy. In 2020, the oil prices were extremely low, at about $40 per barrel, and now they are $80 per barrel, which is much higher than 2019 pre-pandemic level of $60 per barrel. Biden made everything to make these prices super high. He cancelled the Keystone pipeline, he prohibited to drill on the federal land, and the most important, a very bad relationship with Saudi Arabia, which is the crucial country for oil production. During the previous administration, Trump had a very good relationship with Mohammed bin Salman, and he could ask him to increase or decrease the output capacity of Saudi Arabia. Now, when Biden administration asks Saudi Arabia to increase its output, Saudi Arabia just ignore this message. Anyway, if the prices goes back to pre-pandemic times, we can expect inflation to shave off 1% out of 3%, which we need to explain. Many incompetent people might tell you that oil prices is the biggest driver of inflation, but it's actually not true, because if you look at the prices from 2012 to 2014, you can see that the oil price was higher than $100 per barrel, and the prices were not that crazy. So how can we explain the rest 2%? You probably have heard of some global supply chain disruptions, some kind of lack of containers and other confusing bullshit. Although it's partially true, it's not really the reason. Let's look again at the inflation year over year, but this time let's also include the separate food and gas inflation. Food prices were growing slightly less than the overall inflation during the pre-pandemic times. As you can see, it's from 1.4 to 2%, but then in October 2020, it suddenly went up to 3.7%, and in the same time the overall inflation was only 1.1%. And 90% deflation of the fuel price. Why would food get more expensive when everything else were actually going down? And bear in mind, it's October 2020. There were no second or third stimulus check, and there were definitely no global chain supply problems, because US and Europe were in partial lockdown. The answer is pretty simple. Capitalism works well when you have predictable, stable conditions. When conditions are unclear, capitalism tends to be more reserved and the prices go up. I think the easiest way to explain this concept is to use IKEA furniture store. I've just went on their website and you can buy this amazing side table for $9.99. And I've personally bought it maybe 4 times in my life because it's really cheap and useful. And on the same website you can find another side table for $150, which is slightly more functional and built from a little bit more expensive materials, but it's no way 15 times more useful than this $9.99 side table. So the question is how IKEA can make a profit out of selling this $9.99 table. Well, the answer is simple. You probably have like 15 times more of demand for these $9.99 tables, and IKEA can sell a predictable, huge quantity of these items on daily basis. Plus, there is no any other store which can sell you $9.99 side tables, so IKEA won the whole market. In the same time, you have a very little demand for this $150 table because you have different models in the same store. You have different stores which can offer you similar quality of the table. So you cannot really predict your sales that well, and you can easily end up with the loss. And that's why the customer have to pay premium to buy this $150 side table. How is this example related to food and inflation? Imagine you are a bacon producer in US and you lived in a very stable and predictable environment during the pre-pandemic times. And then suddenly pandemic is here. You've got a bunch of lockdowns and people change their food habits. For example, let's have a fake example of some Californian who used to eat in a very healthy diners, and now because of pandemic the guy has to work from home and cook his own breakfast with lots of bacon. You can have an opposite example of, let's say, someone from Texas who used to eat unhealthy in all these diners, like eating bacon every day, and now there is a pandemic and he has to work from home, and now he decided to live a healthy life, at least for this period of time. Because of this, the demand for bacon is rapidly changing, and the worst thing, you cannot really predict how it's gonna change, because you don't really know what's gonna be the particular lockdown and work from home policies in particular state or locale. As the result, bacon producers try to be more conservative and produce less of a bacon to avoid the loss at all cost. And this drives prices up. Unfortunately, COVID-19 is still around. There are probably going to be no harsh lockdowns anymore in America or Europe, but probably there are going to be a bunch of people who are going to work from home during this winter time if the infection rate goes up again. The problem is that no one can predict it at that point. So my guess, until we tame COVID-19 completely and it becomes like another flu, we have to live with this 2% transitional inflation. Now it's time for really hot stuff. I read an article on Intercept that inflation actually is good for normal people and it's bad for 1%. The genius author of this conspiracy theory is John Schwartz. Quick check on his biography tells us that he works with Michael Moore, and Michael Moore is a very charming but very stupid Marxist filmmaker. So let's read it, it's gonna be fun. The inflation freakout is all about class conflict. In fact, it may be the fundamental class conflict, that between creditors and debtors, the fight that is going on since the foundation of the United States. Whoa, I thought mass media is just a bunch of stupid, ignorant people who have no clue about how economy works, but apparently 1% is trying to play some dirty game. That's because inflation is often good for most of us, but it's terrible for the kinds of people who own corporate media outlets or, say, founded coal firms. Apparently, rich got poorer because of inflation. Boy, tell me more. You'll notice here that both Times and Post were misleading about this. The Post headline, "Prices climbed 6.2% in October compared to the last year," makes it sound like prices went up 6.2% in October, i.e. in 1 month. Well, newspapers like clickbaiting titles so that people click and read on this. You need to have a brain of AOC to assume that it's all about 1 month. So why has inflation seized the imagination of the corporate press? It's simple. First, inflation lessens the real value of the debt. In 2020, Americans' household had around 14.5 trillion of debt in their mortgages, credit cards, student loans, and other sources. Inflation of 6.2% means that the real value of that 14.5 trillion is now just 13.65 trillion in last year's dollars. In other words, the inflation over the past year has effectively transferred 850 billion of wealth from creditors to debtors. That's a lot of money. Okay, basically his claim is about if a poor guy owes $1,000 to some rich guy, then after 1 year, because of this inflation, he has to give 6.2% less. And that's a big win for working class. It might sound pleasant for ignorant Marxist mind, but it's not how credit system works in the United States. It's not even how it worked in 19th century where Karl Marx was alive. The purpose of banks is not to take the money from creditors and give it to debtors and then charge some random percent, despite popular belief. Banks create money out of thin air if they trust that the client will repay it back. In fact, US banks are only required to hold 10% of on-demand and check-in deposits, meaning that 90% of the money are not coming from any creditors. Now, if you look at credit card annual percentage rates in US, they vary from 15 to 20%. Which means that banks can't really lose any money with 6.2% inflation. Mortgages are a completely different game. If you look at the current 30% loan rate, it's actually extremely low. Usually it's around 3 to 5%, which is barely higher than the expected inflation of 2.1%. But look at the rates during 2021. They are less than 3%, which is way less than during previous pandemic and pre-pandemic years. And probably this year we'll have the lowest mortgage rates in the whole history of United States. I always thought that investors are the smartest people in the world, but apparently 1% is dumb as hell. They knew that there is an inflation, yet they decided to lower the interest rate for mortgages. By the way, have you ever met any rich guy who invests in mortgages? People invest in stock market, they actually buy some properties, they buy some land, they invest in precious metals, they invest in Bitcoin. And the price for all these investments have skyrocketed during the past 1.5 years. As a stock market investor, I know the thing. So, who are these crazy guys who buy your mortgages? Well, the biggest investor is government, specifically Fed, but also Social Security Office and bunch of different governmental organizations. So basically, it's not 1% who's gonna pay for this, but all that poor and stupid taxpayers. Then our Marxist author tells us that the actual wages in US for regular workers actually went up 5.8%, meaning that purchasing power remained pretty much the same as it was 1 year ago. And here I can agree, but the problem is that unemployment rate in US is still higher than pre-pandemic times, and in the same time, employers cannot find enough workers for some reason. So there is something very strange going on in this situation, and I would rather assume that the shortages of these workers actually drove these wages higher. In Marxist metaverse, the purchasing power of unemployment people is irrelevant because government can always give them some money. Put these two things together, lower the values of their assets and higher wages for workers, and you can understand why the rich who run the US absolutely detest inflation. Show me at least one rich guy who complained last year about inflation, you stupid commie. Thanks for watching, don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you next time. Bye!